morning and welcome to More Than Luck, a podcast where we talk about luck, superstitions, and what it all means to all different sorts of people. Each week I have a guest with me. My name is Emily. Each week I have a guest with me and I ask them a couple of questions about superstitions that they hold and times in their life that they were lucky. This week I'm very excited. I'm joined by my good friend from college, Dan. Hello, Dan.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to the show. I'm really glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
You and I had talked a little bit. We went to a wedding together recently, and you and I had talked about the show, and I was really excited to have you on here because you and I think, sat together at brunch the next day, and it was just so much fun riffing with you on this topic. And so I'm just very excited to have you here, and hopefully we can have you back for another episode too.
It was long enough ago that honestly I don't remember any of what I said, so that'll translate to some fresh riffing.
Those breakfast mimosas really do a number. Although I think we both had coffee, so I don't know. The party was wild, so... All right. So Dan, welcome to the show. Are you ready for the first question?
Sure.
Psych, that was the first question. No, I'm kidding.
Ah!
Ready for the actual first question. Dan, do you feel lucky?
Probably the one that I thought the most about. In like a micro sense, not really. And actually, now that I think of it, in a macro sense, not really either. I don't think I've ever felt like a particularly lucky person. I'm sort of always been a make your own luck type, I guess. Sort of a, I don't know. If you want things from the universe, I think you have to kind of let the universe know. And I don't think, at least for me, at least in my life and my experiences, things don't really just happen to me. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy for me to let myself kind of fade into the background. And so it's really like a constant struggle for me that I feel like I have to make my own luck. I have to be proactive in life in order for really anything good to happen.
Do you think you're successful in the luck that you make then?
To a point. But in a lot of cases, we may get there eventually over the course of this, but I'm really right now in the middle of what I would consider like a pretty major downswing in my life. Mm-hmm. And, the reasons that happened are just sort of things, that I had no control over ultimately. And so to me, I think of that as bad luck, really. Mm-hmm. So.
Huh. Interesting.
So really, right now, I'm in the process of sort of remaking myself and my life and making new luck because, as far as I'm concerned, it's really not going to happen unless I make it happen,
That's a really cool viewpoint. Sort of building yourself up so that you have that store of good self-made luck waiting to happen. Good old fresh homemade luck.
Because I think, in a weird way, I think this kind of ties back to my background being like a lifelong sports fan, mm-hmm. For professional athletes is, failure is a constant, and there's all of this math and all of these advanced analytics now that say, well, really the optimal thing to do is X, and you're going to fail Y% of the time, but whatever X action, you put yourself in a position where good things are likely to occur, but never guaranteed, really. And really, that's, I guess, kind of my outlook is put yourself in a position where good things are likely to occur, at the very least.
That's good. That's a good way to invite that sort of thing into you.
Right.
So, actually, the topic of sports is a really good one to segue into what I think, or into our next question, because I know there is a lot of superstition in sports teams, so I'm curious if your answer to this one has anything to do with that. What is a superstition that you have held in the past, or even that you currently hold, that you would like to share?
So I am like extreme. I'm on the extreme end of like not superstitious, for the most part. And I'm trying to think of like things maybe when I was a kid. I remember there was I remember thinking there was like one football season where I don't know where this came from, but I had this Darth Vader figurine, and I would have it point at the TV screen every time we watched a football game, and he was like doing the Darth Vader choking motion,
like with his lightsaber.
Like, oh, I guess the podcast listeners can't see me, but
the sound effect was very good.
Yeah, you can imagine a Lord Vader with an arm outstretched, just choking life out of some poor rebel soldier. But anyway, I had him pointing at the TV screen, and the team just didn't lose all year. It was the year that they went all the way to the Super Bowl undefeated. And then ultimately, I mean, that's sort of the end of the story, is they lost the Super Bowl that year. I think that was 2007. With the Darth Vader figurine pointed at the screen. And so I was like, well, this superstition obviously wasn't true then, right?
But up until that point, you were like, I gotta set up my figure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. After a while, it was just a joke at first, but like after a while, it became like a thing. Oh crap, the game is starting. I have to go get my figurine, as though like that had any sort of, significance. Kind of like the old joke. It's like, why do you yell at the TV? The little men can't hear you.
Yeah.
But it's weird. I honestly, I mean, I'm thinking back, and I would have been in high school at the time, so like not a kid. But for whatever reason, it was just a thing I did, and I felt compelled to do, weirdly, and I don't know if I could even tell you why.
I mean, it's interesting from a psychological standpoint. It reminds me of sort of the Skinner pigeons. The idea that they could instill sort of air quotes, superstition into pigeons by introducing food to their environment at a random time during the day. And pigeons would begin to imitate the behavior that they were doing at that time, thinking that their behavior was causing the food to arrive.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's your story is really interesting to me because, so in this study, these pigeons had a very, very difficult time letting go of their superstitions when they were confirmed to be not true. Now, they were pigeons, so that's fair. But you, and even human beings, have a hard time letting go of superstitions. The part of their brain that connects patterns often picks up things regardless of whether or not they're connected, and they say, oh, this happened because I didn't follow this pattern, or oh, this did happen because I did follow this pattern. But it's interesting how you took it very scientifically and you went, nope, I thought that this meant this, it clearly doesn't, coincidence. I think that's a rare skill.
Well, I mean, I think in fandom life, the Super Bowl loss is a pretty devastating is probably too strong a word, but like, you're upset. It's an upsetting event.
It is.
But anyway, so, afterwards you're like, you probably think more about, like, again, weirdly, like what led up to that than you probably would normally. But I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of just like crazy wild stories of stuff that like athletes have done, certainly, a guy, goes out and gets 4 hits in a baseball game and is like, well, I guess I'm just wearing these socks every day now. It's that same thing. Like, well, I guess I just have to imitate everything that I did today.
Mm-hmm. Whatever sort of comes to mind first, they're like, this is the thing that I've got to do to keep this happening.
Stories of guys eating the literal same meal before every single game because it's just like, well, I just have to replicate these circumstances.
So, speaking of lucky socks and lucky meals, Dan, what is something that makes you feel lucky? This is a difficult question, I think, given the rest of our conversation.
Right. Other than the other than the Darth Vader figurine, which, I have no idea where it is now. So maybe that's why all of this has happened in the last couple of years.
Your overconfidence is your weakness. No, there's a better quote I'm sure that I can come up with. I'll think of it later.
Yeah. Man, honestly, I think that I'm just such a, like, I don't know. I forget what the word for that is, but realist, scientific-y, real-worldy kind of person, believes in the corporeal.
So, like, skeptic would be what you would use if you are talking, I think, specifically for metaphysical stuff. But it has sort of a negative connotation, unless you're talking about, like, holistic medicine or something.
Right. But, realist isn't really the term I'm looking for either, but, like, I guess I'm such a, like, scientific, believes in things I can see kind of person that it's like, I have a hard time even thinking about the world in those terms, if that makes sense. So, like, for me, I might say, get up for work and put on, like, my favorite outfit, like, I love this shirt. I feel like I look like $1 million in this shirt, my favorite pants, whatever, I feel like I look great. I got a good night's sleep. I fed the cats. I did this, and I'm rolling into work with my backpack. Like, that's probably the closest thing I can think of, is like, like that day where, like, everything kind of came together just right. You
look good. You feel good.
Yeah.
You're ready to punch the sea bear.
And, like, in a way, as I've, over recent years, much more closely interrogated my own behavior, I definitely act differently on those days. And I still haven't been able quite to boil that down into something that I can replicate every day. Mm-hmm. But
that's tough.
Right.
I know those days.
But it's weird, right? Like, things as subtle as that can dramatically affect the way you behave and consequently really the way other people react to you.
That's true. And that's just sort of luck bending.
Right. I'm much more likely on those days to strike up conversations with coworkers, wander around the office, try to do something social after work, all of those things. And it's really, like, just directly related to, like, a subtle change in really what I would say is my own mood. Mm-hmm. As to whether or not all of that's luck, I mean, that's hard to say. And I sort of feel like for me, this will branch off in a lot of other directions because it's just, it's a hard thing for me to think about and even try to apply to my own life.
But I strongly understand the making yourself feel good and sort of going out and meeting up with the world. A lot of times, a lot of the things you described, like striking up a conversation with somebody, talking to a coworker, doing something social after work, a lot of those have, I think, a high probability to return something positive.
Right.
Like, sure, it's a gamble. It's a gamble, and so sometimes you strike up a conversation and the person wants nothing to do with you, or sometimes you try to do something social and the night sort of falls flat. But if you're already in that place of confidence and sort of, well, self-confidence is redundant, I just said that, but when you're in that place, you're more likely to get those good returns.
Right. And it too, like, when you're, I don't know, when you're in the good place and you're glowing and you have anime sparkles, you're really just kind of doing. You're in the moment and you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to do this for the purpose of getting something. Mm-hmm. It's, I'm going to whatever. Like, you're just there. You're just like,
yeah,
you have light and the light is shining.
I had a meditation teacher who would say, you're present in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I wish I could shine more, but we're all on that journey, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. The brain is a weird thing, and chemicals are never level, always in flux.
Never.
So, my next question, I'm really interested to hear your answer to this one. Would you mind telling us about a time that you felt really lucky? Or, rephrasing, a time where you felt you'd really set yourself up for luck?
You know, I don't know. I don't even know if I should take it here, but this is the first thing that springs to mind, so why
Then take
not?
it. Mm-hmm.
So, when I was in college, when you knew me and spent quite a bit of time around me, those were not good years for me. They weren't. And I'm not sure how obvious it was to people around me at the time, but like particularly probably like those middle 2 years, I was just an abjectly miserable person all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like to a level that I don't even think I quite realized at the time until I like, because it was me. It wasn't the environment. It wasn't other people. It was it was like mold growing on my soul or something. I don't know. It came from me. And
that's an apt analogy, I think.
But it like wasn't until I kind of got out into like adult life that I sort of almost dropped the thing I've been fidgeting with. It wasn't until I got out into adult life that I sort of, again, like kind of looked back at my own behavior at the time and sort of thought about it and was like, oh wow, I was just like fucking clinically depressed at the time. I mean, I really still am now, honestly, but, you go through varying levels of things over the years and you develop coping skills over time, and I was just someone who was just like, really wildly out of control and had no coping skills whatsoever, and, it did whatever it did with me at the time. But anyway, so basically, especially like probably my junior year of school, I went through some just awful, terrible stuff, and, I was in a really just terrible, toxic relationship with someone for like a year and a half, and this person just like needed serious help of their own, and again, it was just like a case of like two young, moron, stupid people who like had no idea what they were doing. I certainly had, given my own issues, like I had no idea how to like care for this person or like be an effective advocate for them in any way, shape, or form. And it was just a goddamn disaster. So like I got out of that situation and I was just like a wreck. I was a shell of a human. And it was kind of at that point that I was like, you know what? I really need to like turn things around. I need to change what I'm putting out into the universe, because otherwise, I'm only ever going to get shit back. I have to change what I'm putting out into the universe because, by my own sort of previously described life philosophy, like, you got to give to get,
Yeah. What you're putting out is what you get in return.
Right. And so, and I probably spent, a good year and a half, like, working at it and really trying to change. And so, like, my senior year was a lot different. And I, it suddenly became very cognizant of, like, how little time I had left in school to, so I really made a point to enjoy things and spend time with people and, this, that, and the other. And the summer after graduation, I started seeing someone who, I really had like grown to admire in school, and, we sort of, I was in the process of getting out of another relationship, but like, we became mutually interested and just became like very, very close over the course of, we worked together on the school newspaper, for like probably that last. So, this is someone who really met me right as I was at my lowest point, and then kind of saw, my kind of upward trajectory through that last year or so. And, just someone that I really admired and that I really honestly was like, holy crap, is like way out of my league. And really, man, that was the moment for me, was when, you know, we were together for the first time, you know, that I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm lucky. I don't know what I did to deserve this. You know, someone who's this cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, you know, what I alluded to earlier, I mean, that relationship ended like 10 months ago, something like that, you know, after like 6 years. And
mm-hmm.
it's weird, right? You know, was I lucky? Does it turning into bad luck now mean it wasn't good luck at the time? Who the hell knows?
Yeah.
You know, but I'm now really starting that process all over again from scratch. Mm-hmm. You know, I've got to like build things back up again, all over again. And it's tough, man. It's, you know, I don't know. Maybe I put too much stock in other people and should rely on myself more. I don't know.
I think one thing that I've noticed in sort of iterations of building yourself back up is that when you get to that point where you're like, oh, I gotta build back up again, there's a period of time where you feel like you don't have anything. And then when you stop and sort of take a step back and you sort of look back at the narrative of your life, you're like, well, I didn't know how to do that and I learned that. So that's one sort of block I've got already in my corner. And I didn't know how to do that, but now I've got that. And so even when you have to sort of start from scratch and rebuild, I find that on further iterations, you always have more blocks than you had at the beginning of the last iteration. Even if some of those blocks are heavy or difficult to carry or things that you probably shouldn't carry in the long run, they're there.
No, and I mean, as much as I don't even want to admit it because it, you know, I don't know, makes me feel like it wasn't as bad as it was or something. I don't know. But you know, in the intervening time since then, you know, I've undergone such crazy, tremendous growth in so many ways and, you know, have, you know, recommitted myself to music and started a new podcast of my own and, you know,
nice.
Have been...
We'll get back to that in a minute.
Have been, you know, learning all this new audio engineering stuff and just, you know, taking on new skills and, you know, and for me, like, the lifelong thing has been like, man, I really struggle with like how to people. And I've really dedicated myself to getting better at people because, you know, really people are kind of the key to all things.
That's certainly true. There are not a lot of non-people options in the world today. Right.
But, you know, like, that's the hard part is, you know, there's no shortage in the world of people who will just tell themselves that things are too hard and therefore they won't do them, you know, and that's, what's the point then? Like, if you're just going to give up, you know, at least that's how I look at it. I realize that, you know, I'm sort of weird and old school and probably way too hard on myself, but like, you know, you gotta try, man. And
you do.
I guess that I realize I'm going off in all kinds of crazy adventures here, and I'm not sure how much any of this really relates to luck. But I mean, I guess that's my central message is like some of that really is what you make of it. You know, I struggle with this because, like, I don't know. I see a lot in people that I know, and even just out in the world, you know, when you see people share dumb memes on Facebook, you know, what is this really saying? You know, when you think about it, and it's like, I see a lot of like, man, the universe is really shit on us, so, might as well not try. And like, I hate that so much, because it's like, it has shit on us in a lot of ways, but like...
But that's a very bleak sort of nihilism take on it.
Right. And, I went through a phase in college where I called myself a nihilist. And, what I've realized is I'm someone who just genuinely I wouldn't have gone this far. I wouldn't have gotten this far if I didn't have a very incredibly intensive, desire to live and be happy. Mm. And really admitting that to myself and admitting that I don't have a heart as black as steel is really a huge part of this process for me.
That's a good process, though. I think a lot of people have times where they wish they had a heart as black as steel. They think it would make things a lot easier.
Right. It doesn't.
It makes it harder to be kind to yourself. And I think that's a step in making your own luck. It's hard to give something to someone, especially if that someone is yourself, and you're like, no, you don't deserve that nap, or you don't deserve the time off to spend on this thing that you're interested in, or you haven't really earned the chance to go out with your friends yet. That's very harsh on yourself. I'm speaking from personal experience, but...
And this is, specifically a 90s kid thing, because I don't see I guess it's Gen Zers are the ones that are young now.
Is it Gen X or Gen Z? Or is it Gen X and then Gen Z?
I don't know. Anyway, but, the kids that are, teenagers and going to college now that are, 10, 15 years younger than us don't quite have this phenomenon. But I think for us, for 90s kids... And it was the music, and it was TV shows that we watched. It was cool. It was cool to have a heart as black as steel, I'm thinking of
all the anti-heroes.
The super depressive 90s grunge music that I grew up loving, Linkin Park and Stained and
Linkin Park.
Yeah, and
yeah, you're right. There's definitely a target Evanescence. Although I do know that those are autobiographical, so I can't even say anything about that.
But this long run of artists who obsessively chronicle their own crumbling mental health, basically, and the ones that didn't die and recovered, when they started making art about all of the other myriad things there are in life besides just depression, they also just got older and their art got less good, and we assumed that was because they were writing about different things.
Mm-hmm. And not because they were writing about, or not because their art changed.
Right.
And our taste changed.
And I don't know. I mean, that's probably a whole other long tangent about, art and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it was at least for me growing up, it was very, almost a cultural influence on me that it just is this way. And to be cool, you have to be this way.
Yeah. I think something I saw today that was uplifting related to this is I saw an article that said millennials are the therapy generation, and they meant it in a positive way, not in a, millennials are going to therapy, but that millennials take the time to stop and look at themselves and sort of recognize what they're going through and take the time to process that. Because, and I think maybe in part, we're so aware of this sort of weirdly dark and toxic thing that we grew up with in our art and in our music and in our media.
We're really now, ironic that I would use the word blessed, but we're very fortunate, maybe. I don't know if lucky is the word I want to use. We're fortunate now that, we have names for a lot of things and ways of... Because, that's really the value of having a name for something, is being able to stop yourself and recognize it. Whereas, 100 years ago, well, you're just hysterical.
Yeah. There's another podcast I listened to that had a whole thing about hysteria, and the doctor on the show was like, it's not real. It's every illness that they didn't want women to talk about is hysteria.
Right.
And having names for that certainly helps. Dan, I wish I could do a 3-hour dissertation with you about media and about music and about development and about how the brain is weird, but we are starting to run out of time.
I am so sorry that you're going to have to edit so much of this. Because I realize we've probably been on for a while, haven't
We've been
we?
on for a while, but this is also episode 3, so we're still in sort of the figuring things out. And so if it's a longer episode, it's a longer episode, and I'm not particularly worried about that. But I do have one more question for you, and I'm very excited to hear the answer to this one, because you've alluded to it a couple of times. Thank you so much for being on More Than Luck, and do you have anything that you'd like to promote today, Dan?
Well, this is the segment of the show where I make my own luck.
Yes. By getting it out there.
Oh, man. What don't I have to promote? So I make music. My musical project, it's sort of the umbrella under which everything resides, is called Deviation Notice. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's just, I'm on Instagram at Deviation Notice, no spaces or anything, and on YouTube at Deviation Notice with a space, weirdly. Probably should work on that branding. I'm currently developing a fiction podcast called Tape Letters, and follow at Tape Letters Pod on Instagram. I think that's the only social media that we have live right now, but that's hopefully coming out in the next few months. And I'm super excited about it because that's like a new project that's come along, and that I took on specifically as kind of part of all of this, obsessive self-development that I've been talking about.
Nice.
So, very, very excited for that when it comes out.
I certainly understand starting a podcast for obsessive self-development.
Hey!
Hey! Do you have anything else? I feel like you have a million more things that I feel like you haven't mentioned. Maybe it's just because I think you're such a cool guy and that you just always seem to have a lot of cool things on your plate whenever I talk to you.
What else? I am the co-host of the Dan vs. D Sports and Stuff podcast, which I can't remember if I mentioned earlier or not.
I don't think you did.
That is, I don't know, kind of still updating, but it's out there. There's lots of silliness and lots of us mostly just being silly and riffing on sports and being total dorks. And that is, I can't even remember all of our social media for that now because it's been so long.
Well, if you send it to me, all of these are going to be in the links below.
DVDcastpod@gmail.com. I remember that.
Okay.
Send us weird emails and we'll read them on the air.
Nice. I'll be sure to do that.
And I apparently may be... should I say that publicly? Yeah, why not? I think I'm apparently going to start filling in on bass for a North Carolina hardcore band called End of Your Rope.
That's awesome.
Super excited to do that as well.
What genre?
Hardcore.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a genre. I thought that was just a description.
It's like, I don't know. I'm sure I'll get beat up at the first show for like getting this wrong, but to my ears, hardcore is like if like metal and punk like got back together and had like a torrid affair.
That sounds awesome, actually.
So, like metal and like punk, like hardcore scenes are super weird mixes of like extreme far left and extreme far right sometimes, and it's, seems like the one around here is mostly far left, so...
Nice. So, all of the things Dan has mentioned is listed in the description below wherever you're listening to this podcast if you want to check them out. Or if you are super duper tired of checking descriptions, you can actually contact me at mead@gmail.com. That's EMIEADIE@gmail.com. Dan, thank you so much again for coming on More Than Luck.
It's been fun. Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we'll be able to have you back again.
Word. Maybe I'll cry next time.
Maybe you'll cry next time. We've broken the streak! And to everybody listening out there, I hope you're feeling lucky.